Tough night at the office for Boots Ennis. I mean, it's a tough night at the office. And I know what you're thinking. You may be looking at it, you may be looking at the scorecards at the end of it and thinking, how could it be a tough night at the office? This man had a dominant victory in a lot of regards. Closest scorecard was 116-110. How you turn in a 116-110 scorecard and say that it was a tough night at the office? And I would make the argument that you have to look at it a little bit differently. You go back, you look at the fight in totality, you look at the scorecards, you come to one conclusion. You sit there and you watch it round by round. You think about the backstory and the fact that this was a rematch. You start to see things a little differently. And the first thing that comes to my mind is the flaws, defensively, the defensive flaws that Boots has shown. This isn't the first time we've seen him get caught with some punches, but it may have been the most. It may have been the highest quantity of clean punches that he got caught with, and it may have been the hardest shots or the toughest shots that he got caught with. And don't get me wrong, he didn't necessarily get hurt in there. We didn't see him get rocked. We didn't see his legs wobble or anything like that. But man, particularly that 12th round, the very end of the fight, when you would think this is when they fought all the rounds that they fought between the first fight and the rematch, we think of Boots as the superior fighter, right? He's better athletically. He's more talented. He's more skilled. He's the guy that we talk about as fighting the potential best in the world, right? He's the guy with all the buzz behind him, 27 years old, all of this hype. After they fought all of these rounds, you would figure that gives him the most opportunity to figure this guy out, get into his groove, do all of these things. That 12th round was arguably the best round of the entire fight for Chukhadzhian. Think about what the shots that he was landing and what he was doing. You know, so many times in Boots' career, I have heard people make excuses for him. And they have said the reason he gets caught with so many punches is because he doesn't care. He's going in there and he's fighting lower level guys. He's fighting guys that can't hurt him. He's fighting guys that he's not worried about. So he wants to go in there and he wants to showcase his skills. He wants to showcase his offensive talent. He wants to put on a phenomenal performance for the fans and get everybody hyped up. And all the time we hear people saying these things. At what point are people just going to look and admit the fact that the dude has some defensive flaws? And he wins fights, man. He looks phenomenal. He's an awesome fighter. I don't want the beginning of this video all of a sudden to think people look that I'm knocking him, that I'm taking something away from him. Okay? That's not what this is about. This is about correctly and objectively looking at the man and his performance and seeing what we see. And we have to remember that we grade him on a different scale. He doesn't get judged the same as everybody else. And the reason for that is that he's calling out Terence Crawford. He wants to be one of the best in the world. He said, I want to become undisputed at 147. I want to become undisputed at 154. I want to fight these best guys in the world. I'm ready for them. They can't beat me. Okay. Well, when you talk like that, we're going to look at you a little bit differently than we look at everybody else. We're going to judge you differently than we judge everybody else because we're judging you against the highest possible standards you could possibly have. Look, I'm a big fan of Mario Barrios. I think he's a very, very good fighter. But Boots isn't calling him out. Boots is calling out Terence Crawford. He's talking about moving up to 154, another weight class, before he's conquered 147 and fighting the guy who's the pound for pound number one in the world. Of course, we're going to look at it a little bit differently. I've been the first to admit, if I was a guy advising Boots, I'm a little bit old school in this regard, but if I was a guy advising Boots, I'll tell him you stay at 147, man. Stick your flag in the ground here. Catch all of these guys that are here right now, like the Brian Norman Jr. and the Mario Barrios and the Stanionis and all these guys. Get all the belts that you can. Get them in the ring if you can. And catch the next crop of guys coming up. And it's for the simple fact that 147 is an amazing division. It always has been. It's got all the history. It's one of the original divisions. Everybody that's at 140 is probably going to end up moving through there. Guys that are going to eventually be big at 154 and maybe even 160 are going to start their careers here. And maybe you can catch them young and catch them early and get a win. In the same way that we saw Floyd Mayweather catch an early win off Canelo, who went on to have a phenomenal career, and it just makes that win for Floyd look that much better. I mean, that's the type of thing that Boots could be doing, right? He could be trying to shape it here. Instead, dude, he's in this horrible position where he wants to chase the crop of fighters that came before him. Look, we talk about, Boots and Terence Crawford in the same conversation because we talk about them potentially fighting. But make no mistake about it, these guys are in two different eras. Look at their ages. And look at when we first started talking about Terence Crawford and he was winning a world title and things that he was doing, nobody even knew who Jaron Ennis was, much less calling him Boots. So they're different eras, they're different crops of fighters. He should focus on his versus having been caught up in this conversation of constantly trying to chase Terence Crawford. Terence put out a tweet after this saying basically the same thing, man. And he said it with all due respect in a respectful manner. But he's like, if you want to reach the mecca of this sport, you need to focus on what you're doing, stay focused on yourself. So technically, we see these problems reoccurring for Boots. We see these defensive flaws. We see the way that he's not able to go in there at times and get things done the way he wanted. Chukhadzhian was able to go in there and wrap him up. Anytime that Boots was starting to look like he may want to get off, may want to get to the spot that he wants, Chukhadzhian's able to go in there and wrap him up. If you want to be an elite level fighter, you have to figure out how you're going to disengage and how you're going to get to the distance that you want to get at. Think about Usyk. Usyk was a master, is a master at being able to stop the clinch. When he doesn't want guys to grab him and clinch, he doesn't, because he wants to be able to get in close and do his work. And he knows that taller, bigger guys are going to come in there and try and wrap him up when he wants to get to his spot, because they want to be at their spot. Boots was really never able to get to his spot tonight. He was really never able to get to the distance that he wanted. And I get it. I'm not the one who thinks Chukhadzhian's a bum, right? Completely different styles from the first fight. He's running around. He's moving all the time. He's difficult to corner and get around. All of a sudden, this time, he's much more. He's there. He's in front of you. But he's still got the feints and the little foot movement. And he's difficult to deal with, some veteran tricks and things like that. That's the kind of stuff that you have to be able to make adjustments mid-fight. You have to be able to figure it out, and you have to be able to find a way to put these guys down if you want to be pound for pound number one in the world. If you want to be talked about as amongst the best, if you want to be able to dance around in these divisions and be a legendary type guy, you have to be able to figure out these types of dudes and get them out of there, man. That's not what we saw tonight. And I'll tell you something that concerned me was the corner. He goes in there, I want to say it was after the 7th round, after the 8th round, I can't remember exactly, but he goes back to the corner and his trainer's telling him, his trainer's telling him, what are you waiting for? Get this guy out of here. Get this guy out of there or already beat him up. If it was going to be that simple, don't you think it would have been done already? If Boots was able to go out there and do what he's done to everybody else, which is overwhelm them with his offensive arsenal and his athleticism and all the talent that he brings, if he was going to be able to go out there and overwhelm them, it already would have happened by that point. Think of all the rounds these men had fought by the time you reached the 7th, 8th round of the rematch. He needed more pinpoint advice than that. Boots is in there getting frustrated. He's talking to people. I don't know if it was the corner. I don't know if it was the people in the crowd. I don't know who exactly. Multiple times during the fight, he's talking to people, getting distracted, probably a little bit disappointed, frustrated. After the fight, he's in the post-fight with Chris Mannix. One of the first things that he said, I need to move up to 154. And Mannix asked him, did you not feel good here? Possibly indicating that the training camp and losing the weight was too tough, or maybe the weight cut itself was too tough. He said, nah, I felt okay. I just need to move up. I don't really like the way that sounds. A minute or so later in the interview, he says, I need to fight the bigger name guys because those are the guys that I'm going to get up for. I need to fight the bigger name guys because that's what's going to help me really get in the correct mindset and be able to prepare, because when you're fighting these bottom guys, it's tough to get up for them. Then he tries to clean it up quick. I'm not saying he was a bottom guy. He's a good guy, but he's just not the best. Because, of course, you want to look and say, if Boots is coming out after the fight and he's saying that a guy that he didn't look great against, the guy that he put his subpar performance in again, is a bottom guy, what's that mean? And here's the thing. If you saw an announcer, a trainer, an analyst, Boots' best friend, if you saw anybody else turn around and say, hey, Boots didn't show up because this guy isn't a big name guy. Boots didn't show up because it was a mandatory. It wasn't somebody he really wanted to fight. Boots didn't have his best training camp. He didn't put on his best performance. He wasn't in the best mindset, whatever. If it was any one of those people who were saying those types of things, you would give it some credence. You'd say, listen, we know how people can be. We know how things are. It's easy to not be able to be 100% clicked on and get into the right mindset and go out there and make that things happen if you're not fighting the best in the world. We would, to a degree, we'd be able to understand it. But when the fighter himself says it, I think it's a little bit worrisome, because what it indicates to me is that you're not disciplined, or at least as disciplined as you need to be to reach pound for pound number one, to fight the best guys in the world and defeat them. You're not disciplined enough. Okay, Mike Tyson said it best. He said, discipline is when you take something that you don't want to do. I'm paraphrasing. I'm probably messing this thing up. But discipline is when you do something you don't want to do, but you do it like you love it. That's what it takes. So this guy isn't the biggest name in the world. It's not the best in the world. It's not the fight you want. It's not where you want it. It's not for the money you wanted. It doesn't matter, dude. Go out there and act as if. Act as if this is the biggest fight that you could ever imagine. Act as if this is the best opponent that you could possibly be facing. Because that's what you need to do in this fight to get to the fight that you want to. So when he comes out and says, I couldn't stay locked in, I couldn't be disciplined, either he's making an excuse because in the moment he's disappointed and he's frustrated and he couldn't quite figure out what it was, or he's telling the absolute truth and he's showing that he didn't have the discipline necessary to perform the way that he wanted to perform. Neither one of those things are good. Neither one of those things indicate towards a bigger, brighter, better future for Boots. how he comes out of this one is going to be very telling. Because now it's like, before there were just a couple people talking, now these spotlights are bright. Now everything is shining on him in the sense of, we saw that these are a couple fights in a row where you're getting caught with too many punches. Now we see that you're coming out after this fight and you're saying that you weren't 100% locked on and you may not have been as disciplined as you needed to be. We saw the corner that was not giving you pinpoint type advice that you needed when you were being frustrated. We saw that you weren't making the adjustments that you needed to make against an opponent who wasn't allowing you to do what you wanted to do. And this wasn't a guy who was the best in the world. This was a guy where you were coming in as a massive favorite because of how you already beat him up in the first fight. Now, I know guys are going to hear this and they're going to think that I'm being too critical. They're going to look back and say, why are you trying to pick apart every little thing that the man does? He's 27 years old. Give him a little bit of slack, this and that. Again, we judge him by a different standard when he talks about being the best in the world, wanting to fight a guy like Terence Crawford. If all he wanted to do was snatch up the IBF belt at 147 pounds and make some dollars, well, great. He's already there. He already did that. But we all know that it's not about that. We all know that this man has incredible dreams and he's talented. He's got what it takes to go much further. But will he actually do it and will he execute on it? That's going to be a different story. Does he have Eddie Hearn behind the scenes trying to push him up to 154? Because he wants Conor Benn to all of a sudden snatch up a belt at 147? I don't know, man. We're going to see how this one plays out. I've been a fan of Boots. Still a fan of Boots. I want to see the man succeed at the highest level and go out there and do absolutely everything and more than anybody thinks he's capable of. But will that be the case? So let me know what you guys think. Am I being a little bit too harsh for this fight? Did you see the same type of things that I see? What do you want to see from him next? Where do you think he's going to go after this one? Let me know.